Mike Tinkey is a longtime Mount Pleasant resident and a businessman who wants to become the next town council member for Mount Pleasant Town Council. He tells me why he wants to fill the open seat on council for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Mike Tinkey, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Always great to be with you.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you are a Mount Pleasant resident. Of course, you are also an entrepreneur and an owner. And now you are a candidate for Mount Pleasant Town Council to fill the seat that was left vacant by now Charleston County Sheriff Carl Ritchie. So tell me, Mike, why Mount Pleasant Town Council? Why now?
Thank you so much, Quintin. It's a pleasure to be with you. Quintin, I've been a long-term 42-year resident of the town of Mount Pleasant. I've been blessed to have 3 children. While I was here, they brought me 3 daughters in love and 6 grandchildren, and they all live within 20 minutes. So that, along with my business experience and the fact that I've been very involved with the town government for a number of years now and currently on the planning commission, I felt like I had the knowledge, I had the time, I had the experience to put my step forward and try to continue to do things that were good to retain our small town feel in the town of Mount Pleasant.
What exactly is that small town feel, and how do you hope to retain it with your particular experience if elected to town council?
Well, let's just give a couple experiences of things I've gotten done in the last couple of years. One, I think it's important to have a good relationship with all the town council members and the staff so that you actually can get things done, because there's 9 council members, a weak mayor, and then a strong town administration. So unless you seek to work together in harmony and seek to build votes and trust, you don't get anything done. So in the last couple of years, a couple of things have come to the fore that have been brought to me by neighbors. One is the noise ordinance, where there was an acrimonious situation where residential meets commercial. Shim Creek was one of those, but there was other areas of town. And a noise ordinance was going to be put through that would make no one happy. So over a period of 2 years, we went from 5 people for the new noise ordinance, 4 people against, and back and forth, and it was increasingly acrimonious. So what I did is I stepped back, and with the help of the mayor, I said, let me just see if I can bring all the parties together. And in fact, at the end of that, Carl Ritchie, who was our former police chief and knew that you had to be able to implement a noise ordinance that could be measured and would not be capricious, put forward the motion for the new noise ordinance, and we got unanimous vote. And that was a couple of years ago that I worked on that. We built trust, and 2 years later, things have been working fine. We've really had no real issues. Another real issue that is very fundamental to me is our green space, our waterways, our tree canopy, etc. And we're losing so many trees for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is illegal cutting, but also through development and not being able to retain or plant back trees in the areas where they came from. So we were able to get through the planning commission that I'm on, planning committee, and the town council, a unanimous vote to have a new tree ordinance that will go into place May 1. Now it's not the perfect, but it's a move in the right direction to be more preventative and restorative instead of just punitive. And likewise, we felt if we needed to really increase our tree canopy from around 27% in 2019 to 40%, which is the average community our size, and retain beautiful heritage trees, we needed to have a comprehensive urban forestry plan. Therefore, we've been able to get voted in as part of the comprehensive plan that the comprehensive forestry master plan is part of the comprehensive plan, and that a tree or urban forestry task force is going to be implemented after May 1. And I hope to be a vital part of that to see we bring back the tree canopy and make that part of our, what I would call our green infrastructure, to go along with our gray infrastructure, because our waterways and our stormwater ponds and our trees are a fundamental part of our environmental sustainability and resilience. And so those are some of the things that are really important to me, but also, the whole idea of our infrastructure is critical. You can't go out very long without getting stuck in traffic. So all the things that we can do fundamentally, in addition programmatically in addition to just building more roads, which means building more roundabouts, synchronizing our lights, rapid response vehicles that are stationed twice a day in key areas where their most accidents and deaths are, so they can make a rapid response with EMS and move the vehicles out of the way so that people can keep moving on with their traffic are important. And probably the last, and it's not the last, but it's one of those items that are most important to me, is community. When you come together, however you tend to come together, whether you play together, whether you're on the ball fields together, whether you're planting trees together, when you have community is what binds us together and keeps our culture strong. And so it's important that we keep the low country culture of hospitality, community, watching out for your neighbor. And that's so important to me for our children's children.
Yes, sir. Sorry, but these gnats are here. They're disgusting. My apologies to you and the viewers. But let me go back. I want to break down a couple of what you said. Obviously, we've all, and I've covered this particular issue extensively on Quintin's close-ups in regards to the noise ordinance, particularly on Shem Creek. How exactly is that particular noise being measured now that the noise ordinance is actually in place?
What a great question. And so what you do is you start with understanding where we are today. Where was the noise ordinance when we did it? Where were the touch points? So we got with the police department and we asked them for a list of every place that there had been issues of noise. Surprisingly, there weren't that many. So also surprisingly was that means you could go to those specific areas without a blunt instrument, and you could very very specifically go to those areas, talk to those people, bring them together, and figure out what those issues were. So we did that by time of day. We did it on a repetitive basis so we could measure where the issues were. Then second, we listened to the neighbors. So for example, on Shem Creek, I have to give a lot of credit to Wade Bowles. He's been 50 years on the creek with his dad. Yeah. And he said, we're all about getting along with people. That's why we've been here 50 years. And then the people on the other side said, we've been here either short-term or long-term. So we literally went and sat together at Saltwater Cowboys. We sat together in the neighborhood right across from it, and we measured different things and Wade's credit again. He would call people and say, here's my telephone number. Call me when you have a problem. We can start to measure and see what works for both of us. And after a period of time, we did that with the post house. We did that with the shelter. We did that with other areas around town. And we said some of the areas are where the residential meets commercial. So you may have to do some things like bring your music inside. You may have to do things like put monitors on the base of your speakers and turn them inside instead of out to the public. Right. You may put in noise buffering fabric, which wasn't that expensive. So we did all of those things. And then when we went to present, it was really cool. We went in front of town council. It was a bit of a surprise, a little bit of ambush, but the town still thought there needed to be a higher noise decibel ordinance, even though we had the business community and the residential community in lockstep, and the business community spoke first and said they were in favor of it. What we did before we went to the vote, one person had 2.5 minutes, and so she had set up speakers in the back. And she said, I'm going to use my 2.5 minutes to demonstrate to you and have you listen to what the noise level is that you want to have done. After about 15 seconds, they said, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. She said, no, I have 2.5 minutes. And she just blasted them. At the end of that, we didn't have to say anything else other than the fact that Wade and other business owners stood up, the post house, et cetera, stood up in favor of what we're doing. Then the neighbors stood up in front of what we're doing. The pediatricians did. And then just to make sure we had it right, we had a 6-month trial. Right. Because we said we might not have it just right. So let's look at it over 6 months. And guess what? At the end of 6 months, there were no issues whatsoever. And now that's been 2 years ago. So it was a deliberative, process-driven, fact-driven approach that highly engaged neighbors. So it wasn't a surprise. Everybody was highly engaged and involved in a solution that literally brought the community together.
And now that particular situation has been essentially resolved in the Shem Creek vicinity, where else do you want to actually tackle that? What are the touch points do you want to take place next in Mount Pleasant?
I think part of it is making sure we have the correct enforcement for the tree. Oh, not on the tree ordinance. I'm moving to another thing, right?
Oh, yeah. I was still sticking with the noise ordinance. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, now, the beauty of the noise ordinance, the way we did that is the police department monitors these and they will graph that. And so they'll say if there's been an issue. So because for the last 3 to 5 years, I've attended virtually every town council meeting where the police chief and the fire chief are at, where the town council members are at, and that's commission, committee, and town council meeting. I can ask Chief Arnold, Chief, what's happening? And he'll say, oh, it's fine, it's fine. And I'll say, are you having any uptick or downtick or whatever problem? And we've had a couple small issues, and they're big issues if you live next to it. So we've been addressing those. So one neighbor was backed up to a well-known grocery store and having a lot of late night cleanups and power washing and all that kind of stuff. And we were able to broker a rapport with the two of them. We had another issue where there was a very noisy area next to a residential. We were able to have them move their equipment and the types of things they did early and late out of that way, and then put up trees and noise buffers. So where we have seen things, we've been able, and there are only a couple, we've been able to approach those specifically to the needs of those individuals to get a good response.
And how long were those upticks, occurring in that area?
Well, to be honest with you, there haven't been that many noise issues. It seemed it was one council member said, "I think we have a solution in search of a problem," and but the reality is, for those who were affected by it, it was real. I mean, kids were being woken up in the night. That's an issue. People that were trying to do business couldn't do business.
Right.
If people wanted to sit in their backyard, they couldn't sit in their backyard. So these were real issues. And then, but by having the business come and sit there with us, or us go and sit with the business and understand what they needed to do to run their business effectively, and come up with noise levels that were appropriate through testing over a period of time, including a 6-month trial,
yes,
we were able to come up with something that people didn't feel blindsided at all.
Right.
They felt part of the solution.
So, okay, let me ask you this then. Where else in Mount Pleasant do you want to replicate this?
Well, wherever it would come up. So, for example, in Tupelo neighborhood, that's a really good example. There was a 300-house development at Tupelo, and in that particular area, the commercial developer wanted to put what was perceived, and I think it was true, what would have been a very noisy 24-hour commercial, industrial, essentially, application right up against the neighborhood. I mean, literally adjoining. And so through a period of deliberation, this time more with the planning commission, and the neighbors meeting neighbors with meeting the commercial owner, right. And then by going through commission, committee, town council, we were able to work together where they moved that heavy use of industrial use to away from that neighborhood, away from that adjacent or adjoining that neighborhood. And when we had a large contingent of the neighbors come to one of the last meetings, and this has to go still to committee and council, they seemed to feel that everybody had worked together to come up with a good solution. Another thing they did was a lot of the traffic going into Tupelo and into the commercial went through one road only. And so you can imagine trying to turn left on Highway 17, right. Take your life in your own hands. And so the developer said, I'll put in another road to that more, what was perceived as a high volume place. So therefore it did not go through the same road as Tupelo and the 300 neighbors. So yeah. These things will come up on a case-by-case basis. But the good news is it's been just a couple times a year that we can deal with, because we have a framework, right, that allows us to deal with this in an equitable way.
Now, when you talk about Tupelo, Mike, what exactly are the ideal decibels for that area?
Well, they'd be the same, and I certainly can provide it to you, but it was an educational process on measuring decibels. And let's use Shem Creek or Tupelo the same way. You measure the decibels from your property line. the receiving person's property line, not the emanating property line. So, for example, if you were to walk to, 7-Eleven by Tupelo, or if you were to walk up to Arby's or was Arby's or Saltwater Cowboys, it may get noisier right up against the property itself. But when you move back away from it, which I walked a number of town council members with me to see that, they saw that, oh, it's really not bad at all. It's within, there's daylight, and there's after hours, there's weekend, and to help the property owners, because that's their big time to make, the business owners, that's their big time. But they tend to be 55 to 60 decibels. And a lot of people say, well, that's just what the decibel level is when you talk. Yeah, but you don't have somebody with a band talking in your living room. So by measuring this and testing the times of day and adjusting them over the time, we were able to come up with a solution that helped. And so we've been able to educate each of these, primarily the residential, about how to measure. The town has purchased decibel readers for the police cars. So when they show up, it's not a subjective thing. Oh, I like it, I don't like it. No. Here's it'll take a tape, videotape, and it'll also do over a minute or two period of time ups and downs. So it's not measured by the peaks, but it's measured by what that mean or median average is over 1 or 2 minutes. And so it allows people to have something definitive in their hand, the police officer, when they come and respond to it.
Well, let me ask you this. I was just over there just last week, but let me ask you, why not have those decibel readers at Shimp Creek, at Tupelo?
Well, in some cases they are. And it's a wonderful suggestion. So, for example, even before the noise ordinance came up, because there had been issues there, Wade Bowles had installed noise meters.
Right.
And so he installed it so he could look and see if he was going over it. So although it's not in the ordinance, it's a practice that we recommend to people because it's just smart. And so now remember, if he's measuring it on site, that's not measuring it at the receiving end. So he actually needs it not only on site to see, what's the, it may be, let's say 75 on site, and that may be fine, which is over the limit on the receiving end, but he knows if he's, depending on the distance to the closest neighbor, he knows what the dissipation is, and he can take that little handheld device and he can go to the edge and test it. But again, to the credit of Wade and some of the people there, he gave out his cell phone number. He said, I can't be there all the time, and so if you have a problem, here's my cell phone. Call me, and I'll have them look at it there, and we'll make the adjustment. And in talking to the neighbors, that's in fact what he's done.
Wow. And I want to get back to that in just a second, Mike, but obviously you talked a lot in this particular interview about green space, and particularly that tree ordinance that's, that's been implemented. Let me ask you, first and foremost, how many trees have actually been cut down in the town of Mount Pleasant over the past 2 years?
I tell you, you've all asking very important and helpful questions. That's the Green Commission, which was formed in the last 2 years, and one of those is to have a more sustainable and resilient Mount Pleasant. And trees have been in front of them, have been asking for that information. And quite candidly, I think there's been over 3,000 permits issued and for a tree removal. This is just what the town has done, not the 1/3 of trees that are being cut illegally, as was done this past weekend on Cottingham Drive. But so when you have a tree permit issued, it can be for 1 tree or 25 trees or more. So we are asking, and we will receive, I'm sure, because the town will be very willing to do it, because it's important. How many trees is that in total that were being removed? Now, you have to look at trees that are removed legally through the permit process. Then you have to estimate those that have been illegally moved. And why do we know that's the case? Because when we talk to the tree companies that do a good job, they bemoan the fact that they've had to get permits, pay taxes, do things, and the illegal cutting undercuts them over and over and over again. And most of the tree companies have a real simple saying. They said, if I don't have enough trees, I don't have a business. because I maintain trees as well as cut trees. And so if I'm really in the business, I'll make more money on keeping a tree healthy than I will on cutting it. So it's in my best interest, and it's in the code of conduct of certified arborists that is their obligation to do it. So we will get a number, and then we'll have to estimate it. The other thing we're doing is geomapping. There's going to be a tree inventory that just got approved on all the public places. This is part of the comprehensive forest master plan, which is under initiatives on the town's website. So you can look at this 200 page.
Right.
But again, on that particular one, we will be able to see how many trees are planted through mitigation, if some permit to cut, and where they're planted. And we are saying a best practice is to replant at least a significant percentage in the same neighborhood where the trees are cut. And we want a diversified canopy of trees that reflects native trees of South Carolina, as well as an understory trees as well. So we're replacing, the trees that we've had over the years. Now, let's be honest, trees have come and gone over the 300 or 400 years that European settlement has been here. We're in with the heavy development going from 16,000 people to 100,000 that I've lived here, a lot of trees have been cut. And so, and with Hurricane Hugo that came too.
Oh yeah.
I applaud the town for having the foresight to get a grant to do the community forest master plan, and it is an excellent plan for the future, so we can literally plant for our children's children.
Okay, I want to get back to that in just a second, but you talked about Cottingham Drive, and I just passed it on my bicycle just last week. I was doing some, food deliveries and whatnot. So how many of those trees in that particular area on that particular drive was actually cut down illegally?
Well, I'm not going to give an address.
Right, of course not.
But there's tools that people have, including the town, and I'm encouraging them, and they use them. You can go back on Google, and you can take an address, pick your own address, and you can look at it at 2015, you can look at it at 2020, you can look at it at 2025, and you can see that, for example, in the areas that we've had issues, you can see healthy, big hardwoods or heritage, what I would call longleaf pine. Right. And you can see those in these different pictures. And in this particular case, we did a snapshot, showed in 2015, and every 5 years, and we showed in 2025, and there's no tree. In fact, there were multiple trees that were cut. And so that's not what I think our 80% of residents of Mount Pleasant, when queried, would you like more or less trees, and would you pay for more trees to be planted? About 80% said we want more trees, and in some areas of town, they were more willing to actually pay to have trees planted. So I think the residents overwhelmingly recognize the value of their tree canopy when they're with their strollers or walking their dogs or in the heat of summer or et cetera. And so we have the tools. I think we're probably going to have to step up and have more enforcement of these, especially the illegal, because it's not fair to the business people that run these businesses that we all use from time to time, that they be penalized by people that aren't paying their taxes, aren't doing permits, and are just coming on a Saturday or Sunday and cutting and grinding and making it look like they never were there.
So was this, I hate to go into details with this because I know this is still probably under investigation, but was this with a company doing this, or was this a particular person doing this illegally?
No, the trees that I'm most concerned about have to have a company to do it. And to be fair, this is happening all over town.
Okay.
Every single time. It's just fresh on my mind, this particular.
Okay.
The other thing, too, and part of it is education. So, for example, a neighbor told me in Park West that a new came in, and they had two 41-inch live oaks. Now, if you want to take a 41-inch live oak, one person or two people, almost three, can't put their arms around it. So we're talking about really the tree of the South, the tree of Charleston, the tree of Mount Pleasant. I mean, the amount of birds, insects, habitat, comfort for people. People gather under trees. Before air conditioning, people would die for that because the community grilled out. The community gathered under these trees. I mean, it's heritage. And so she heard that, and she was on the board at the time. She said he heard he was going to cut it down because it was in the way of his driveway. But she had the foresight not to be combative, but to get somebody out from a name of a company, and you can imagine where I'm going with this. It's called Save a Tree. But they came in and did a detailed analysis on the economic value of that tree and the price increase they would achieve by having these trees in their yard, and landscape architecture, that all they had to do is curve the driveway around that tree. And by the end of it, he realized it was like a $200,000 value. Why would I ever cut it down? But it took a lot of people coming into town or aren't as educated. So it's incumbent upon us to try to educate people as to the value of a tree. And so I've been working with some of the trade associations in town to try to get a research study done. They've been as to the value of a tree for the increase in price you can achieve for selling your house, the increase in value that you have by having it, not only from dollars and cents, but a reduction of energy on your energy bill, for capture of stormwater, right, and helping with your garden for the enjoyment. So I think it's a two-pronged attach, but I think the more we get involved, the town, again, giving credit to the town through the Green Commission and others, has planted over 5,000 trees, or given out and planted over 5,000 trees this past year, through a tree giveaway, through different programs where we've gone into neighborhoods and planted trees, where we've whole neighborhoods like Bell Hall, through a group called Green Neighborhoods Work, have planted 55 trees, and 6 of them were 3 longleaf pine on either side of their entrance, to replanting in the same neighborhood in Park West, as well as into the old village of Mount Pleasant. So by getting it planted through volunteer effort, which I think is critical, we shouldn't in any way insist that the town do everything for us. We can do it in partnership, and in partnership, we get education, we bring community, we get people excited about what they're doing. And in the case of Bell Hall,
yes, sir,
one person had a great idea. They said, let me bring families out and let the children adopt a tree. So that over time, in my lifetime, I have 2 brothers. We planted trees when each of us were born, and we grew up, we watched them grow. And so when our great aunt died at almost 100, we planted a tree for her, and we watched that, and we would, utilize that. So by having children help plant the trees and adopt a tree, there's buy-in. And so I'm bullish about what can happen. I think we're in a good place. I just was with Mount Pleasant Waterworks and the town at a meeting, and they are doing pollinator gardens in their so that they can help from a bee habitat, from a habitat for birds, for migratory birds, with native plants in the Mount Pleasant easements, Mount Pleasant waterway easements. I mean, not waterway, Mount Pleasant Waterworks easements. So the town is also now starting to put in pollinator gardens. Again, and there's active buy-in from beekeepers and different people that recognize those pollinator gardens are essential to our life cycle of our food. And so I think we're at a place where the town is poised to move forward through resilience and sustainability. Our mayor is bullish about it, but I would say the whole town council overall is bullish about this, because after all, this is the Low Country. It's a beautiful place. That's one of the reasons we're here, and people live here for generations, and they don't go away. If they do, they come back, because our waterways and our green spaces and all that are on our sweetgrass basket weavers, and all the people that we have here, and the people that grow native plants and utilize them for a variety of reasons. It's nice when you have a grandchild come and they want to taste the different plants that you have. That's important. Then they have buy-in. So I think we're at a good place. I just would like to be the ability to be our next town council member to carry forward this work into the future.
Actually, I want to get back to that in just a second, Mike. But let me ask you, what areas in the town do the town of Mount Pleasant management, the town of Mount Pleasant administration want to actually replant trees?
That is a great question, and I will direct you to a very specific question because it's a detailed answer.
Okay.
When you do an inventory of trees, and if you go to the Community Forest Master Plan, there's a couple pages there that actually shows the town. And in back of you, I can't tell what's in back of you. Is it trees?
Oh yes, sir. Right here, I'm right here downtown on George Street.
Well, let's just say if you were to flip that around, certain parts of that, but your background are very green, where it's lush and it covers the brick, and other areas aren't. So what you will see in this map of the different districts of town, like right there, you see it's covered.
Yeah.
So it'll look like this is great tree cover, and then there's great tree cover, and then in other areas like Patriots Point, which a marsh and was filled in, there's hardly any trees, and so it would indicate, and I've been on the planning commission on this, it's indicate that we've said it's specifically that the developer with Patriots Point Annex wants to move forward, they have to replace or add to, because it may never have been there because it was marsh before, a tree cover with diversified plants and shade trees for the enjoyment of all, the public especially. And so, and I think that'll get done. So we're going into specific areas where there's the least amount of trees and also where people want trees. Not everybody wants trees. So when we replanted, and there's a reason for that. So when we on a recent street that heads down to the water, the first two rows of people didn't want another tree right in front of their house because it would block their view of the harbor. But the next three aggressively wanted trees, and they wanted live oaks, and we planted them there. So why force something on somebody? There's plenty of places to plant trees. So let's find where the right tree is for the right place with the right buy-in of people that in that particular case were willing to adopt a tree, because these were in easements where they would help them and take them on as a project.
Well, let me ask you this then. How many trees does the town of Mount Pleasant actually want to plant do mitigation?
Well, there's two questions there. I will go to the bigger question. If we wanted to get to 40% tree cover, we would need to plant a net of just shy of 5,000 trees a year. Now that's net. You have to take the trees planted. You could say, well, we may have planted that, you said, Mike, in 2024, or at least given them out to be planted. But it doesn't take into effect how many trees were eliminated with those 3,000 permits through engineering and planning, how many trees were lost. It doesn't take into effect the number of trees that are illegally cut. It doesn't take into effect trees that died by obsolescence or storm that fell down and were removed. So you're, again, a brilliant question. We need to be able to measure net plus or minus, and we have the tools today. It's just basic math. We just need to put together a spreadsheet that says in any given month, here's the reasons we lost trees, and understand that, and what were the types of trees, and here's the trees that were planted by mitigation, and here's the ones that the mitigation, unfortunately, under our old tree ordinance, you were incentivized to just pay and no tree planted. In my mind, my personal opinion, and not be planted. So the new tree ordinance, I'm hoping, will incentivize people to, one, keep a tree through education. If you plant it on site, if you can, and plant it in the neighborhood around you, if you can. So I think it'll be a combination of mitigation. It'll be a combination of reporting. It'll be a combination of a variety of things that helps us get to a net positive as we move forward.
And I only have 2 minutes left, unfortunately, Mike. But let me ask you this. Well, how much would the town of Mount Pleasant actually pay the actual resident or business owner to, for this incentive?
Well, we're not at that place yet, so we'd have to have a conversation on that. But I think there's enough opportunities. The incentive might be there's a lot of ways incentives could be done. One, incentivizing people to leave them on the property because they could see how expensive it was to remove them, and they could simply move their design of their house around a little bit to take advantage of what's really an asset for them. And it would take what I talked about with the noise ordinance, a give and take on the part of the residents and the community to get buy-in on that. And in many cases, as in the case of some of the trees we planted recently, we've been able to get some grants to plant them, and it's been worked into the budget through the mitigation and tree giveaways to the people that want them at the right place. So they may just get a free tree. That's how a good portion of those 5,000 trees happened. So I think that it's a multi-pronged attack, and it's one that starts with the understanding of the value of the tree, some favorite memories that you had of being under a tree with your grandma. My grandmother would hug the tree with her nieces and nephews and talk about loving that tree. And that was when they were tiny, and they're now in their 30s and they're going and hugging the tree. I know that sounds crazy, but they remember being with Mima, and they remember what it was like to be with Mima and how much she cared about that. And so I think it's, just developing an understanding and love, and realizing that's an essential part of the fabric of the Low Country we've come to live and love. And also remembering you're not forcing anything on anybody. There's enough to go, enough places to plant them with people that want them, that I think just the power of the positive influence of that and the good example will cause people to go, oh my goodness, look what that looks like. I'd like one of those too.